smoke.
I can't see it here.
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds.
Are they in the proper approach pattern for today?
Negative.
Hold the weapon! Now! Charge the lightning field.
Welcome back to Dispatch Ajax. I'm Skip. Psst.
Huh?
Did you say your name?
Oh, I'm Jake.
Oh,
Hi.
there we go. All right.
Hey everybody.
I just stroked out for a second. That's fine. Judas Priest, man.
Do you hear that? There's like a tiny Oompa band playing in my head.
Well, we are here doing our second part of the Multiverse of Madness recap, this time focusing on the DC Universe. And I would like to preface this by saying that we'd recorded this before, and somehow I lost the audio. It no longer exists. If it ever did, maybe I was hallucinating the whole thing. So just like DC, we are going to reboot this podcast episode.
This is the new 52 of the Multiverse podcasts.
Oh, that's a shame. This is hyper time, baby.
Oh, that's even worse.
It is.
Maybe this will be the Dark Knight's death metal of, You don't even know about that stuff, do you?
I've read some of the synopses, but I don't care.
Awful. Awful.
And I like Scott Snyder, so that's sad.
Maybe you need to read this, and then you won't like him anymore.
That's probably
Anyway,
fair.
we're not getting into that today. No hands of creation coming down to turn us into gods or whatnot.
Or what have yous. I'm the time trapper, and Jake over here is Eternity.
Hey,
Well, golly!
I'm going to tell you about Dino DNA.
That's exactly how the multiverse works. So, we did the Marvel Multiverse thing first because of Spider-Man Multiverse of Madness. Or no, I'm sorry, Spider-Man into the, I don't know.
Spider Strange and the Edge of the Verse
And the Edgelords. That Spider-Man movie.
No Holds Barred. I think that's what it was.
Spider-Man Fubar.
It's Spider-Man versus Mr. T in an arm wrestling competition.
Spider-Man over the top, yeah.
Oh, he's putting his mask on backwards.
He arm wrestles for the custody of Miles Morales.
Somehow Gwen Stacy still dies. I don't know.
But he does get a semi-truck at the end, so.
That spider buggy that would go up walls.
That's about as good as Superman's car.
Yeah, wow.
I actually had the Hot Wheels Superman one. I'll give them credit for them making it a spaceship, at least, instead of a car. But it had in front, instead of like guns, it had these two plastic fists that when you hit a button, they'd shoot out like they're Kirk-fooing you.
It's time for you to get fisted by Super Justice.
I mean, obviously, that's not the worst DC-related toy tie-in of all time, which is, of course, the Green Lantern Power Fist. But it's up there.
Green Lantern Power Fist. I gotta see what this looks like.
Please look this up. Please look this up. I bought one.
This thing? Does it shoot out at you?
Oh, no. It just thrusts back and forth.
It's a Green Lantern shake weight?
No. It's literally a handle with a trigger where a giant green fist thrusts back and forth. That seems well thought out.
Gonna get my Power Slinger Battle Fist.
Have you found pictures of it?
Yeah. Oh, man. There's veiny green jizz that forms into a fist.
Yeah.
Pull handle to extend. Try me! Exclamation point.
They realized at some point that they'd done something really bad, and they tried to change it up, or they recalled it, and then they had, instead of a fist, they put something else on it, like an arrow or something, but the damage was done.
At least rectally it was.
Try me, pull handle to extend. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I feel it. I feel the power.
Maybe the greatest toy ever made.
They're exploring my nether sector.
The nether realm. Now we're going to get into the heart and soul of multiverse-ness. DC wrote the book and then burned it, and then ate it, and then shat it out, and then wrote it again. over and over again.
Gross.
I sit in judgment. The living tribunal judges all. So DC's multiverse started innocently enough with the introduction of the publisher's first team-up in 1940's All-Star Comics number 3. Until that moment, it was nearly unheard of to have characters cross over, even though they were all contemporaries. In an attempt to shine a spotlight on lesser-known superheroes of the Golden Age, DC created the Justice Society of America, which apparently is going to be in Black Adam. And I have to say, that was the only cool part about that trailer, was seeing Dr. Fate and Atom Smasher. That was pretty awesome.
It was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool one.
It was pretty cool. I was like, I never thought I'd see Dr. Fate on the big screen. That's pretty awesome. So the world's first superhero team had a lineup of Dr. Fate, Hourman, the Spectre, the Sandman, not Sandman, the Sandman. So there's 3 Sandmen, so you know.
They're all going to sweep you away.
They will all haunt you in your dreams. There's the Sandman from Justice Society. There's Neil Gaiman's Sandman in Vertigo. And then, of course, there's
Metallica's Enter the Sandman? Is that what you're trying to...
Mr. Sandman.
Rock on, bro.
The Atom, the Flash, Green Lantern, and Hawkman. Then, of course, later, Wonder Woman. The interesting thing about that roster is that not all of those characters were actually owned by DC, which is crazy. The Atom, the Flash, Green Lantern, and Hawkman were all published by the now defunct All American Comics.
All American Comics.
Yeah, it's got Hulk Hogan tearing his shirt off. And this made the JSA a team of heroes from different publishers, which is the first intercompany crossover ever. The idea was so widely popular that they continued their run until issue 57 in 1951. Skip ahead to Wonder Woman... sorry, I screwed that up. Skip ahead to Wonder Woman number... Shut the f*** up! So skip ahead to Wonder Woman number 59 in 1953, and we're introduced to the first mention of a parallel Earth, where Diana meets her counterpart named Terra Taruna, or Wonder Woman in her native tongue.
She just goes by Trudy.
Judy Tenuta? Is that what you're talking about?
Oh my god, yes! That's exactly what I was talking about.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, Jesus Christ, man. Like, outside of people like you and I, who the f*** remembers Judy Tenuta?
No one. It's just us and Judy.
That dates us hard. Most of the characters involved stayed on the shelf until 1956, when DC decided to reinvent an old property by introducing the new version of The Flash. In Showcase number 4, we see Barry Allen inspired to become the Scarlet Speedster by reading Flash comic books. This means the Golden Age Flash is a fictional character in this universe, and thus the JSA is no longer in the world in which the comics take place. That is, until The Flash number 123 in 1961. So they got real meta and then had to figure out the fallout from that. It's like I don't know, Grant Morrison's impact on DC.
Could you get out of my goddamn brain?
Really?
I was literally about to yes.
Go ahead, do your thing.
No, I didn't have anything. It was like, oh, that's some real Grant Morrison shit right there.
It is Grant Morrison. You can't get more Grant Morrison than that, unless you shave your head. So this issue was a turning point because in it, Jay Garrick, the Golden Age Flash, crosses over into Barry Allen's universe by vibrating at a specific frequency, wink, which allows either of them to slip through the barriers between worlds. This arc, which is called The Flash of Two Worlds, would set a precedent for the next 25 years of DC continuity and also set them up for the biggest quagmire of writing and editing in the history of comics.
I will have to say, get rid of this whole cosmic treadmill, and we need a cosmic Sibian. That's what we need to be vibrating on.
Yep. Now we've been introduced to the concept of Earth 2, and that the Justice Society of America lives there, some members of which are counterparts to Earth 1 characters. This helped resolve the issues surrounding the rebooting of characters like The Flash and how it was established that Golden Age Flash was an actual comic book character in Silver Age Flash comics. This whole idea was a boon for DC, seeing an exuberant response from readers following the Flash of Two Worlds arc. The publisher turned up the juice by revealing Crisis on Earth 1 in 1963's Justice League of America number 21, and Crisis on Earth 2 the following issue. In it, the Justice League teams up with their alternate reality equivalent to battle villains Kronos, Dr. Alchemy, it's not just a clever name, Felix Faust, the Fiddler, the Icicle, and the Wizard, who have discovered the secret to traveling between two universes. The arc was a smashing success, so much so that DC implemented a crossover series between them every year until 1985.
Print that money, yo.
Print that
Also, the Fiddler only lasted a little while, and then he got his secondary name, the Kid Fiddler, and he went to prison.
A valiant effort.
It's a pederast. I looked up a picture of him, at least from the animated universe, and he looks like Iggy Pop got himself together and put on a suit.
I can see that. The first of these was a great little twist on what they'd created called, of course, Crisis on Earth 3. In that story, the JSA and the JLA team up to fight more direct counterparts to themselves, but in a universe where the JLA analogs are villains, called the Crime Syndicate. On this world, just bear with me here, President John Wilkes Booth was assassinated by Abe Lincoln. Columbus discovered Europe. And the British colonies revolted against their American oppressors. That doesn't really make it... Like, none of that makes any sense. That's like the last season of Sliders, where it got real dumb. Having completely dominated Earth 3 and nothing much to hinder them, Ultraman, Owlman, Power Ring, clever, Superwoman, and Johnny Quick, who were the Crime Syndicate, invaded Earth 1 after Ultraman gained Ultra Sight by being exposed to kryptonite that allowed him to see into parallel worlds. I have a feeling this is kind of like Lion-O's Sight Beyond Sight.
I can see you masturbating.
I hope that's what he uses that power for. Just to shame people who are masturbating.
Winston Reed on 4th, 3rd, 19th Avenue. I see what you do when the lights go out.
So all of this happened in Justice League of America number 29 and 30 in 1964. The next year's follow-up was Crisis on Earth A in 65's Justice League of America 37 and 38. In an attempt to not repeat themselves, DC gives another clever twist by having the evil Earth 1 equivalent of JSA member Johnny Thunder steal the magic genie called Thunderbolt. Man, this is a thing you're going to have to look into. Who gives Johnny his powers from Earth 2 and use it retroactively to delete the existence of several JLA members. Earth 1, now having a rewritten history that doesn't include the Justice League, becomes Earth A. So this is their first example of using, these reboot tools to streamline continuity. This will set up a precedent that we will all regret later on. The last named crises were Crisis Between Earth 1 and Earth 2, ! In JLA 4...
Well, you didn't say it right.
Earth 1 and Earth 2!
That's right.
In JLA number 46 and 7 from 1966, and 1967's The Super Crisis That Struck Earth 2, and The Negative Crisis on Earths 1 through 2. There's a dash there.
Oh, the Christ crisis.
Oh, man, they're not even trying at that point. It's like when NBC got the NFL back. I remember there's this one point where they had Thursday Night Football, which is branded Thursday Night Football, and they had Sunday Night Football, and they wanted to keep the brands, so they had to do one that was on a Saturday, and so they did this dumb thing that was like, Thursday Night Football, Sunday edition on Saturday. What the f*** are you talking about?
Are you having a brain hemorrhage right now?
Right, I know, it's so stupid. So,
Crisis.
Well, yeah, of course, Crisis. And The Negative Crisis on Earths 1 through 2 in JLA's numbers 55 and 56. I think it's funny that it's crises on Earths 1 through 2. Like, there's a bunch of universes between 1 and 2.
Well, let's be honest here. I mean, there's like 1A, 1B, 1 negative 1.
Okay. I don't think that was really a thing. It's like, okay, so, I mean, was a dash cheaper to print than an ampersand? The whole premise was clearly running out of steam, as the only memorable anecdote from these was the introduction of Earth 2's Robin. Now, we've talked about Mark Greenwald a little bit, and Omniverse, which was a fanzine produced by him in the fall of 1977. It dealt with making sense of comic book universes and cohesive histories, how parallel worlds, time travel, or alternate dimensions played a part in the universal scope of fiction and, hell, even in real life. Only 2 issues had come out before Mark was hired by Marvel to work full-time with that company, and he never went back to revisit his fanzine, which is kind of a shame. I'd like to have that kind of omnibus now. Surprisingly, it had some real talent behind it. Jerry Ordway did interior art. That's up there. Pete Poplaski did the first issue cover. So one of the first things they tackled was the Superman and Batman of 3 worlds. This was an attempt to incorporate Bob Haney's World's Finest Super Sons stories back into continuity, which we're dealing with again today. But by doing so, it helped make sense of the problems within the Superman and Batman storylines. The Super Sons were shown as teenagers in the 1970s. They couldn't be part of the Earth 1, having never appeared beforehand in the Silver Age, nor were they part of Earth 2, never having been alluded to in the JSA appearances or any other crossovers. And the fact that the Superman and Batman of Earth 2 looked much older than the fathers appearing in the Super Sons. So, a parallel Earth seemed to be the only logical answer, and Grunwald designated this Earth E. Obviously, this is unofficial because it's not DC canon, but it actually makes more sense than DC canon. So, here are the characters that he breaks down of the 3 Earths that he laid out in 77.
Break him down.
At this point... there's only 3, so be thankful. This is all you have to deal with. Superman from Earth 2, Rocket lands in 1920 when he's just a few months old. He's raised by John and Mary Kent. He had no Superboy identity, which is fine. He was a reporter, but is now the editor of the Daily Star, not the Daily Planet. He married Lois Lane in 1949. They don't have kids for, I think, obvious reasons.
Thank you, Mallrats.
Yeah, I know, it's stupid. He's retired from crime fighting. His cousin is Power Girl, not Supergirl, and that will come back later. Lex Luthor has red hair in this, which will also come back later, and he's a member of the JSA. So, Superman of Earth E, his rocket lands in the 1930s. Kal-El is a 2-year-old at that point, which is kind of bizarre. They inherited an alien with superpowers in his terrible twos. I'll opt out if I can.
Yeah. No, thank you. I've seen Brightburn.
Exactly, yeah. You read the nail? Let's just make sure that happens. He was raised by Jonathan and Martha, of course. But in this version, he was Superboy.
Why'd you say that name?
The dumbest part of that movie. No one gives a shit.
I'm just thinking they're writing the script. Wait. Holy shit. Whoa.
Dude, you're right. They're both named Martha.
They're both named Martha. Oh, good.
Oh, shit. They're like brothers now.
Oh, man. We gotta make the whole movie about that, bro.
Oh, my God.
It blew my mind. It's gonna blow their minds.
God, dude. I'm an idiot. So in this, Clark is still a reporter for the Daily Planet. He married Lois Lane in 1960. They have a son, Clark Kent Jr.
Clever name.
Right. Thought a lot about that one. He's still active as a crime fighter. He doesn't have Supergirl or Power Girl as a cousin. Just there are no other Kryptonians. There's Kryptonite. Lex Luthor is bald and older, and he is not a part of any group, JLA or JSA. So then, Superman of Earth 1, in Grunwald's assessment, his rocket lands in 1938, which is when Action Comics #1 debuted. Kal-El is 2 years old when they find him, also still problematic. Of course, raised by Jonathan and Martha. They were de-aged by some sort of alien ray.
Happens all the time.
Hey, when you go out, your friend gives you a drink, you don't know what's in it, maybe something drops in it. The next thing you know, alien ray, you're 20 years younger. Which is how it works.
We call that science.
We call that Saturday night. And then Jonathan and Martha Kent both die in 1955. And then he's Superboy for a while. Then he becomes Superman. He was a reporter for the Daily Planet, but then he now is at WGBS, which is a TV station where he's now a newscaster. And in this version, he and Lois do not get married.
Swinging bachelor, all right.
You know, because Superman, you push in a lot of eroticism with Clark Kent. But in this universe also, so in this universe, he doesn't have any kids. He's still fighting crime. His cousin is Supergirl. All the irradiated kryptonite eventually just turns into inert lead. And Luthor's bald. And Superman is a member of the JLA. So now we get to Batman. So Batman Earth 2, his parents were murdered in the 1920s. His career began in 1938, which I think doesn't make any sense because Detective Comics 27 came out in 1939, but whatever. Former Playboy, but now police commissioner. That's interesting, though. I think you could do something with that, where Bruce becomes police commissioner. I don't know if I like it, but I think you could do something there.
Well, there's a lot of things you could do with that. The first thing that popped in my mind was, what if he bought the police like OCP did in RoboCop?
Was that RoboCop 3?
Well, technically, they're trying to buy the police in one, right?
Well, it was Delta City.
Yeah, they were just trying to own the whole city, right?
Yeah.
I try to forget RoboCop 3 as much as possible.
He spent hours awake at night staring at the ceiling trying to forget
Make it go
RoboCop
away.
3.
Make it go away. Make it go away.
That's why you developed that heroin habit.
I gotta chase the dragon and make those rockets fly away.
So in Earth 2, Batman married Selina Kyle in 1955. She died in 1976.
No.
Thing, I know. But they had a daughter, Helena Wayne, in 1957. She, of course, goes on to become the Huntress. None of that matters. So Batman of Earth E, his parents were murdered in the 30s. His career began in the 50s. He married Kathy Kane in 1960. Now, Kathy Kane is a product of McCarthy hearings and the seduction of the innocent. I'm just going to say, I'm just letting you know.
Here we go.
I'm sorry. It is. That's why we have to eventually talk about it.
He's not sorry.
Kathy Kane was invented to prove that Batman and Robin weren't in a pedophilic gay relationship, which is why Batwoman now is Kathy Kane as a gay woman, because they're trying to like fix that ill.
Gotta flip that script.
Yes. So, Earth E, this is where you get Vicky Vale, Batgirl, Bat-Hound, Bat-Mite.
You're not going to tell everybody about Bat-Mite?
That's a story for another day. It's kind of like the Great Kazoo, you know?
That's actually very accurate.
Bat-Mite and Mr. Mxyzptlk are different. So, Batman of Earth 1, his parents were murdered in the 50s. His career began by 1960. Not married, no children, still kicking ass. And at that point, Dick Grayson is no longer Robin. He's Nightwing, a Teen Titan. This is where you see more stuff with Barbara Gordon, Silver St. Cloud, and Batman is a member of the JLA. Please note that this only accounts for stories through fall 1977 and only pre-crisis. It's also important to note that there's no clear cutoff dates from one version to the next. Any given adventure may also apply to more than one counterpart, because it was a disaster. It was just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what stuck. Here's an example. Batman met Scarecrow in World's Finest number 3, and again in Detective Comics number 73. These are obviously Earth 2 stories. But he next appeared in Batman 189, which would mean Earth 1, but a mention was made that they met beforehand, which shouldn't be. So a number of these stories occurred to more than one counterpart, apparently, although we only read one version of it. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Wonder Woman, Green Arrow, and Aquaman very probably have Earth E counterparts. Other 1950s candidates for Earth E include Captain Comet, the 1960s Plastic Man, which originally appeared in Playboy, which I think is fascinating. Buona Beast. Oh, Buona Beast. Nothing problematic there. Nightmaster, Sea Devils, Enchantress, all sorts of characters who never seem to be incorporated into the Earth 1 mythos. So, that's the chaos that populated the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So, now it's a mess. It's patching on top of patching. It's Band-Aids trying to figure out how to create a continuity that makes sense. The more they get into trying to explain things, the worse it gets, because then you have to explain the explanation and how that would impact the rest of continuity. It's a disaster. So currently, it's the mid-1980s. The Multiple Earths events have finally fizzled out. DC's 50th anniversary is quickly approaching. The landscape of comics is changing to a more serious tone again. Real writers write comics with an eye toward good storytelling. The Comics Code Authority has loosened its death grip on the maturity of comics, and things are a little bit different. The publisher is looking to move their properties to an era when comics can be taken more seriously as a genre. Again, like they were supposed to be originally. So DC's editorial staff looks to consolidate and get on the same page when they notice that there are basic flaws in their thinking to this point, which is the understatement of the millennium. Here are some inconsistencies they have to deal with. DC allowed writers to use the multiple Earths to explain flaws in continuity created by unsupervised writers, essentially, and this only complicated matters. Take legacy characters, for instance. One of the most glaring problems from that time was Earth 1 Black Canary. She was supposedly the daughter of the original Black Canary from World War II. Unfortunately, that Black Canary was from Earth 2. This means that she would have to have been a known fictional character in a different reality. That's a little complicated.
Okay.
Yes, I know. It doesn't get any better from here. And so when DC was trying to tackle these issues and trying to figure out how to legitimately streamline this to make it make sense, they hired Marv Wolfman and George Perez to figure it out. So here's some of the notes that Marv Wolfman made. Number 1, the various manifestations of Atlantis have to be discussed, and possible explanations for the inconsistencies. Number 2, the inconsistent future inside the DCU are enumerated. For example, Commandy's nightmarish apocalyptic future doesn't match up with the Legion of Superheroes, bright technological near utopia of the 30th century. That's a thing. And 3, there's a lengthy explanation of various multiversal, interdimensional, and time travels of the Flash. So at the time, they'd been continuing the adventures of Earth 2 Superman, who was married to Lois Lane, who's a TV reporter, and getting up there in age. Earth 1 Superman was still a newspaper reporter with the Daily Planet. This is confusing as hell. So DC tapped Marv Wolfman and George Perez to not only pare down the multiverse into a logical consistency, but also update their entire catalog of characters for a new time. This was the official end of the Silver Age. The guillotine has fallen. This was Crisis on Infinite Earths. So during this crisis, everything's on the table. Every character, every Earth, every possible variation of story, they all came together, assembled by the enigmatic Monitor. The infinite multiverse must defend all of existence against the malevolent anti-Monitor, who wishes to use an antimatter force to begin things anew. Thus, the most epic, most ambitious event in the history of superhero comics takes place. It'll have long-lasting effects on these characters in the way we see them today. Some will die, some will return, and some finally start making sense. It's 1985, the Crisis on Infinite Earths is in full swing. One by one, the worlds of the multiverse are disappearing into the ether. Supergirl is dead. The only person who can thwart the evil Anti-Monitor is, of course, Barry Allen, the Flash. Represent, bitch. Pushing his super speed to the ultimate limits, Barry reverses the action of the villain's enormous universe-ending machine. Sadly, knowing he has no other option, he pushes himself further than he knew possible and dissolves into pure energy. Just as the history of the multiple Earths begins with the Flash, they end together. So now, the new history of the DC Universe is being rewritten. Instead of older characters hailing from the second Earth, they all exist in the same universe. Jay Garrick did inspire Barry Allen, but as a historical figure from World War II, not a fictional character. Everything now starts over from scratch. DC relaunches all of their titles with number 1 issues, not their old numbering. Superheroes already exist, but haven't been around for decades. We're entering a new age of heroes. We see a new version of Superman's origin. We see Batman rebooted with Year 1 and Year 2, which are funny because Both of them were pitches for Batman Year One, and DC liked them both, so they decided to publish both of them. It's like those two prequels to The Exorcist.
¿Por qué no las dos?
Exactly. So this all makes sense, right?
Yes. So just for those who aren't in the know, those other versions of Superman or Batman, they just went away?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
That was the idea. Well, no, they don't necessarily go away. The idea was that because
there's only one Superman now.
No, not now. Now, no.
No. Well, so like after Crisis.
After Crisis, there's only one Superman. Yes, but
yeah.
Then later on, it turns out that's not true either. But we'll get to that later.
What?
Though the undertaking was brilliant and ambitious, it didn't solve everything. There were still problems with... I know, believe it or not.
That was the whole point.
I know, and you know what? It's probably the most successful reboot of all time. It's probably the most successful company crossover of all time. They did so much work and so much research. But inevitably, there were going to be a couple of threads to pull on. There were still problems with the long-established characters and how they fit into the few surviving Earths. For instance, the Legion of Superheroes lived in an alternate version of the 30th century, but writers didn't necessarily want to tie this new world's future to it. So to solve the problem, Superman number 8 reveals that a pocket universe was created to house the Legion, keeping them alive and allowing them to cross over with current characters. It's not a parallel universe, but a small oasis that preserved part of the multiverse. This is where we get the Time Trapper and all that stuff.
Here's my pocket. I'm just going to drop that Legion in there. There you go. You just stay safe right there. Don't worry. I'll give you an M&M later.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Time Trapper kind of sounds like the Mighty Max.
Mighty Max.
Oh, I got them all in here. This allowed them to keep and create characters that couldn't exist in the one universe to rule them all. So, like New Kryptonians, for instance, they couldn't exist in the new Earth because Superman was the only survivor of Krypton. The biggest and most glaring problem with the new timeline was Hawkman.
Oh, Hawk Dude, that's right. Hawk Guy.
Who's really important, as it turns out.
Debatable.
No, he is, mostly because he's one of the linchpins of why things go wrong.
I'm just saying, just to erase him from existence, that would be fine.
I don't care about Hawkman. I'm just saying he's one of the reasons everything goes tits up.
Explain to me why he tits up the whole thing.
Carter Hall, Carter, was in... Well, this is important.
Whenever you have to, like, spell someone's name...
I know.
Carter, Carter, that's... Ugh.
No, we're in trouble.
Yeah, that's bad news.
He was in the 1940s JSA, which is now a part of the New Earth after Crisis. But when the great Julius Schwartz reintroduced the little-known character in The Brave and the Bold, number 34 in 1961, it's revealed that Carter was actually an alien cop from planet Thanagar named Carter, Katar, Hall, Hol, who assumed a human identity in the form of Carter Hall.
Wait, did he have a room at the Holiday Inn Paramus?
He had a hairless cat?
Oh, that's weird, man. We're recycling Ghostbuster 2 jokes.
We keep using that over and over again. So he assumed a human identity in the form of Carter Hall. But that didn't work because the pre-61 Hawkman lived on Earth 2, and the new Hawkman was on Earth 1. So how could they logically exist?
Magic.
Well, they can't. That's the thing. The continuity problems with telling this story have now laid the seeds to unraveling the hard work and effort of Crisis on Infinite Earths. It'll take about 10 years, but these errors become an untenable roadblock for writers. The character is rebooted over and over and over again to explain, but they just keep falling further down the rabbit hole. The new timeline is in trouble, and the countdown to 0 hour has begun.
No, don't do it.
No, Dan Jurgens, don't do it.
Just get rid of Hawk Guy. Who cares?
Zero Hour does not treat Hawkman well. I'll tell you that right now.
0 Hour doesn't treat the reader well.
No, it doesn't.
So we finally moved into the Bronze and Modern Ages. DC is on the other side of streamlining the universe. Things seem peachy keen for the publisher because things finally make a bit of sense. All the characters in their stable have been rebooted to easy-to-follow, modernized origin stories, and readers, both old and new, can jump on board without years of research. Except for a few glaring omissions. Hawkman, Hawkgirl, and Hawkwoman. Tertiary, somewhat obscure characters, to be sure, but their convoluted histories are the cracks in the foundation that leads to 0 Hour. It's 1994, 10 years after Crisis on Infinite Earths. DC's big extreme events.
Well, you remember all these.
Yeah,
all
I
their
remember
extreme events.
extreme.
Like Bloodlines and all that
Designated to cash in on the perceived industry momentum of the shiny Image Comics emergence are over. Superman's back from the dead. Batman has gotten that pesky spinal injury out of the way. And all that's left is Hal Jordan's fall from grace as Parallax.
So Jordan has been driven mad during the Death of Superman arc when the evil cyborg Superman wiped his hometown of Coast City, which is San Diego, off the face of the planet.
You hate to see it.
It's true.
In case none of you know what the reign of Superman was, after Superman died, there were multiple versions of people claiming to be Superman who emerged. One was like a flashy Superboy. One was a cyborg Superman who seemed to be Superman but half cyborg.
But resurrected as a cyborg.
Yeah, one was a guy called was he Eradicator?
Well, he called himself Superman, but he later became the Eradicator.
He was a cold-talking Superman lookalike with glasses.
He also killed people.
Yeah, he murdered dudes with old people shades on.
Gunther Cunningham glasses.
And there was a guy named Steel, who is a guy in a steel outfit with a big hammer.
God, we should talk about how racist that is.
Yes, yeah.
His name was John Henry Irons.
Oh my God.
And he used a giant hammer.
Did no one raise any red flags here?
They eventually dropped the Henry thing, thankfully, and the hammer thing.
After a long
time.
And when they had another Steel, who was like a woman Steel, she still had the hammer.
Well, she was his daughter.
Yeah. Ugh.
Well, eventually they turned it into DC's equivalent of Iron Man, where he had created this mech suit because he was a tech genius, even though he literally was working as a construction worker. Hal Jordan murdered the rest of the Green Lantern Corps and took all of their rings for his own machinations.
They were shiny.
Let's rewind 3 years to DC's annual issue crossover Armageddon 2001. In it...
Do we have to?
Yeah, well, because we'll talk about it again later, so... In it... Well, some of it was okay. In it, a mysterious time traveler named Wave Rider, who's a combination of the Watcher and Silver Surfer, came from 10 years into a dystopian future when a hero turned villain named the Monarch. Wave Rider would look into the possible futures of every hero's timelines to determine the villain's identity in hopes of preventing his fall from grace. This was one way to explore a different sort of multiverse without actually creating one that would exist permanently. So Monarch was originally supposed to be Captain Atom, a former Charlton Comics character, and of course the inspiration for Watchmen's Dr. Manhattan.
Captain Atom, he's our hero.
That's good. This fact is accidentally released to the public before the conclusion of the story and received very, very poorly. So desperate to save face, DC scrambled to change the reveal from Captain Atom to the former Teen Titan Hawk from the duo Hawk and Dove, not Hawk from Spencer for Hire.
Yes, everyone was super preoccupied with that.
Hey, it was Avery Brooks from DS9 fame. He had a spinoff called A Man Called Hawk.
It also wasn't Hudson Hawk.
And it wasn't Hawk from Buck Rogers. That's a hawk of a different color.
I think that's a bird of a different feather, actually.
There you go.
Yeah, Hawk is worthless. He's a terrible, stupid, worthless character.
So that caused DC to retcon things in confusing and cheap ways to support the change. Suddenly, they're back to where they were before. So something had to give. So with Parallax looking to put the horrors he suffered right, and Hawk/Monarch discovering his possible fate both directions in time, he uses his powers absorbed from Dove's death at Monarch's hands to turn into the new time-manipulating villain, Extant.
Wait, who are we talking about?
Yes, exactly. So when DC decided to reboot again, they created a character where they actually had Hawk turn into somebody else called Extant. Hey, listen, man, come on. This is like X-Men here.
Yeah, but at least X-Men is kind of fun, and there are characters that I like.
I don't know. I like a lot of these characters.
Do you? Do you really like Hawk? As okay Captain Atom is, it's like,
Nobody likes Hawk.
and who's Hawk gonna kill? Hawk can't kill anybody.
I like Captain Atom. He's fine.
He's baseline fine. He's whatever.
Yeah.
At least when Jean Grey is a clone and goes in the future, you know, it's just stuff like that. That's crazy, but it's like, I like Jean Grey. Let's see what happens. But
Yeah, I don't know. I like Jean Grey.
who could care?
Yeah, that was one of the biggest flaws with this, was that they didn't take characters that really are impactful. Well, no, that's not true, because Parallax being Hal Jordan was a big deal.
Yes.
That had impacts for years to come when you look at it retroactively through the lens of Green Lantern Rebirth, which is legitimately good. But yeah, nobody gives a shit about Hawk. I feel like Hawk and Dove are the cloak and dagger of the DC universe. Like, nobody gives a shit.
Yeah, it's Cloak and Dagger without any of the interest.
Yeah, Hawk's big thing is that he's like a conservative Republican who has a hothead, and Dove is the empathetic one. Great. Well, I don't like any of you.
Yeah.
So, who cares? Which is why they were willing to throw them to the wolves and make them the villains. It's not even as clever as, like, Terra or Jericho, you know?
Yeah.
Which are great Shakespearean arcs where they turn on their friends.
Yeah, that's actually like creating characters with drama and, you know, pathos. Something's happened. This is like, hey, I'm Hawk. Bad guy now. Okay.
I have a costume that looks like it was designed by Rob Liefeld.
Didn't have as many patches or pockets.
That's true. And you could see his feet every now and then.
Gotta see his feet, man.
So Extant teams up with Parallax and vows to reshape the universe to fit their ambitions. This is what's known as the Countdown to Zero Hour. It's a new crisis designed to address the insane contradictions that already cropped up in this continuity, but in classic fashion, it doesn't work. Only gets worse. So Hal Jordan's trying to recreate the entire post-crisis on Infinite Earth's timeline to undo the events that drove him to murder the rest of the Green Lantern Corps and become Parallax. As is the main theme and problem with Zero Hour, things aren't really ever explained, but are just, you know, fixed. Like, there's a new character named Damage, who is the son of the Golden Age version of the Atom. Not the guy that shrinks, but the one that punches atomic blasts, which is very era-specific. He joins the fight and restarts the universe Hal dismantled by creating an artificial Big Bang, which, that's a stretch. So instead of dying and being swept away in the wave, Hal Jordan survives the incident because of an arrow from Green Arrow, Oliver Queen, which knocks him out of harm's way. They figure out all the Parallax stuff later. So now the universe is rebooted. Again. DC has adopted the Marvel model of history, and instead of relying heavily on fixed events in time, the universe now exists in a sliding timeline that begins with the appearance of post-crisis Superman 10 years ago. In Marvel, it's always 15 years, depending on the creation of the Fantastic Four. We've discussed that before. So everything should be good, right? It all makes sense.
Yes?
Cool your jets.
Oh.
DC thought they were being clever by taking all the Hawkmen that caused so many problems, stuffing them into a bag, shaking them up, dumping them out onto the floor, and declaring them fixed.
Oh, all these Hawkmen are dead.
Oh, no.
Did you not poke holes in the bag?
Took all the Hawkmen, put them in a bag, and threw them in the river.
Did you think I was going to buy you a Hawkman?
Tap shoes! So former Green Lantern Guy Gardner suddenly is revealed to have alien powers that he was never aware of and has no reason to have.
He becomes a fucking pro wrestler with like Iron Man guns that he just develops
Randomly.
in a weird Cronenbergian out of his flesh.
It is very much like Videodrome.
Yeah, it's like Ultimate Warrior meets Videodrome.
Included in the new timeline was events like Armageddon 2001, which required the continued existence of arcs that had been eliminated already from the official canon.
If you have noticed a pattern here, post Crisis on Infinite Earth, they keep trying to fix things, but just make everything worse.
They make everything worse. Post-Crisis was okay. They found some flaws, so they tried to fix it. And then they tried to fix the flaws created by the thing they tried to do. And then that made it worse. Leave it alone.
It's like cutting your hair yourself, where you're like, you cut your bangs and like, oh, that's not quite even. So I could cut it more right here.
And now you're bald.
Yeah. And eventually you have no hair because you f***ed it all up.
So, these events kept piling up, causing the creation of a concept called hypertime.
Hypertime.
Created by Mark Waid, hypertime was DC's way of putting a Band-Aid over the fact that none of their reboots had done what they were designed to do, no matter how much they thought they covered. It presupposes that every single incarnation of every character does exist in one form or another. Each timeline has its branches like parallels and exists without intersecting with the mainstream.
So which one's the mainstream? Whichever one they're using now. So that's stupid.
Helpful.
None of the side timelines can be more important than whichever DC is currently using, no matter what. And that changes arbitrarily. Hypertime is a timeline in name only. It turns out to just be a cheap plot device to use a multiverse without calling it that.
So in the current Marvel Universe parlance, that would be like a variant.
Mm-hmm.
I clicked on the hypertime on DC.fandom, and the first thing that pops up, it's a haggard Batman. It says, this project page needs to be cleaned up. Accurate.
Then years go by, and cracks are starting to show in even this version of reality. 0 Hour did next to nothing. Writers are even more confused. Then along comes Jeff Johns.
Which, I mean,
Good and bad.
but yeah, positives and negatives.
It's a mixed Hawkman bag. He legitimately does what was considered impossible and explains every version of Hawkman and why it doesn't make sense to keep adding or erasing things that didn't happen. I'll give him that. He moves over to the Flash and starts laying the groundwork for streamlining his relatively confusing past. Hot off of that, he moves to Green Lantern, where he tackles what happens to Hal Jordan, why Jordan really became Parallax, and just what Parallax is. Things are slowly making sense.
Yeah, killing it. Killing it.
So he's making things work for the first time in, well,
Ever.
yeah. Then one day, after helping to explain the back and forth inclusion of the Golden Age JSA characters, Johns asks a question. Who exactly is Power Girl?
Mm-hmm.
And he exposed a very important gap in continuity. DC's just seemingly found its new Wonder Boy in Jeff Johns. He had an iconic run with the Flash. He fixed the pesky Hawkman problem. He made the Green Lantern books a jewel in the DC crown with the return of Hal Jordan. After Jordan's stint as Parallax and redemption by sacrificing himself to restart the sun, in Grant Morrison's run on JLA, the former Green Lantern had since become the new DC Spirit of Vengeance, the Spectre, which I liked. I think that was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently in penance for all the horrible shit he did as Parallax. But then, thanks to Jeff Johns, Hal came back as Green Lantern, and he becomes the first domino to fall in an event that would lead to a bright new day for the publisher. Later in 2005, he wrote the main 7-issue miniseries designed to be the crisis that finally fixed it all. The one crisis to rule them all, Infinite Crisis. Now, this crisis would be a direct sequel to their most effective and ambitious popular effort, Crisis on Infinite Earths. Golden Age, or Earth 2 Superman, his wife Lois, Superboy, who is from Earth Prime and crossed over with the Legion of Superheroes, and Alexander Luthor, who is a young hero from the evil Earth 3, voluntarily hid away in a pocket universe. We've already addressed that. They hadn't been written out of history when the dust settled, so they simply went away to live out their lives. So as they watch from their bubble, they do something pretty clever. Since, due to government mandate in the 1950s, comic books were more squeaky clean and innocuous in the Silver and Bronze Ages, these heroes didn't much like the dark tone of the new world left after Crisis. It gets kind of meta here. Earth 2 Superman leaves and seeks out Power Girl, who's revealed to be none other than Earth 2's Supergirl. While she had no knowledge of who she was or of the old multiverse, yet survived the crisis, she was special. Power Girl would be the key to fixing what the other survivors saw as flaws in the universe. So Earth 2's Lois is dying, and this new world seems just as ill. Superboy Prime, who was a hero in Crisis on Infinite Earths, was the only hero on his world when Crisis hit and never really had any proper moral compass. He never turned into Superman. Pa Kent was dead. So together with Alexander Luthor, they launched a plan to bring back Earth 2, desperately hoping that Lois would recover on her own world and then they could all live on in paradise. It's flew too close to the sun scenario. Turns out that Luthor and Superboy had discovered that their actions in the Pocket Universe could affect the new universe, the actual one universe. After a Kylo Ren-type tantrum, we discovered that the continuity errors that remain were hiccups caused by Superboy punching the walls of reality that housed them, which is both dumb and awesome. It kind of makes sense the way they set it up. I mean, it is dumb.
Yeah,
but
it's dumb like on its face.
But it makes sense in the context.
In the context, yes.
Kind of.
We're really trying to stretch this.
Occasionally leaving their pocket behind Earth 2 Superman and Lois's back, they begin to manipulate events in our world to create another crisis that will generate an Earth 2 of their own design. So they use the remains of the villainous mastermind of the original Crisis on Infinite Earths, the Anti-Monitor, to create what they call an interdimensional tuning fork, utilizing heroes and villains that had close ties to Earth 2 and who don't necessarily fit into this new reality. These heroes have become iconic villains simply by acting on their darker, grittier, and more complex universe that they don't understand. So the DC brass decided to recreate the DCU with what they saw as a new streamlined direction they could control from day one. Power Girl is essentially Mon-El in that they have all the powers of Kryptonians, but they're not quite Kryptonians, we think.
And no, we're not going to tell you anything about Mon-El, because we're not.
Well, I'm sure we will at some point. I mean,
they're like Kryptonians, but not. Daxamites, right?
They're Daxamites, and they're the exact opposite of Kryptonians in the way that instead of kryptonite, Daxamites...
Yeah, it doesn't kill them. They get off on it.
They jerk off all over it.
It's hot.
Superman can't see through lead, and you can put kryptonite in a lead box, and it won't affect him. It insulates him. Mm-hmm. But with Mon-El, he suffers from lead poisoning. So, like people.
Like you and me. Don't send him to Detroit.
So he got poisoned by lead, and then Superman didn't know how to fix it, even though I'm pretty sure there are a lot of treatments for lead poisoning in the world today.
Yeah, but Daxamites are immune to those particular treatments. So that's why.
Use that kind of stuff. And so Superman put Mon-El in the Phantom Zone until he could figure out how to fix him. And he did so for 10 billion years or whatever, how long ever it takes in the Phantom Zone.
That's like, oh, you have cancer. You need to go to prison.
It's exactly like that stupid idea around cryogenic freezing. It's like, well, if we freeze them at the time of death, then they'll be able to revive them. And we're like, why? They're dead. Wouldn't it have been easier to freeze them before they died?
They're only mostly dead.
There's even a Star Trek episode about that. 2 Star Trek episodes about that. And 2 movies. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So,
that's why it's stuck in your brain.
This is why we have a show.
we can't get the out of here, no matter how we try.
Yeah, so we spewed onto you.
So it turns out that there are just a few loose threads that even Crisis on Infinite Earths and Zero Hour didn't manage to clean up. One of which was Hawkman, as we discussed. The other of which is who Power Girl is. Because we never talked about where Earth 2 Supergirl went. And it turns out that when the universes folded into each other, Earth 2 Supergirl became Power Girl.
You said Supergirl.
I'm an idiot. It's terrible. I'm an idiot. All right. As it turns out, nobody knows where Earth 2's Supergirl.
No, Supergirl. That's who she is now.
No, she's Power Girl now.
I can't make Supergirl Power Girl. That doesn't work.
Surfer Girl.
Supergirl, all right.
It's Usurper Girl.
Usurper Girl. Yes, that's her name from now on.
She overthrew the throne. What we found out was one of the biggest issues of Crisis on Infinite Earth, of course, was the death of Supergirl, which is one of the most iconic covers of all time by George Perez, where
Superman, he's holding her limp corpse, is crying, is sad.
Well, she is dead. She's his cousin. He's allowed to cry.
No.
He's like, well, pussy.
He's not allowed. He can't have feelings.
It's whatever.
There's no time for feelings during a crisis, Skip. There's no crying in Crisis.
There's a lot of crying in Crisis. I mean, one of the main characters is Psycho Pirate.
Oh.
That's all he does is make people feel feelings. So anyway.
She dies with the headband on?
Yeah, it's headband Supergirl that we're dealing with.
Huh. All right.
It's crimped hair headband Supergirl in Crisis.
Hey, it was the 80s, you know? You gotta roll with the times.
It's like she went straight from the set of Xanadu to Crisis on Infinite Earths.
All right.
But there is an Earth 2 Supergirl, and they never address in Crisis where Earth 2 Supergirl went. So it turns out Earth 2 Supergirl is Power Girl when she was folded into the one continuity to rule them all. When Lois does die, Superman from Earth 2, Kal-El, Kal-L instead of Kal-El, is easily manipulated because of his grief by Alexander Luthor and Superboy, the cervix of time or whatever.
Wholly necessary.
So essentially what they did was in this, and it's probably the weakest part of Infinite Crisis, is that by Superboy angrily punching the walls in tantrums, created ripples throughout continuity that create errors that explain why things aren't quite exactly right, like some of the Hawkman stuff and Supergirl being Power Girl and, you know, some of the other, like, you know, continuity problems that were created.
Bringing Jason Todd back to life.
Bringing Jason Todd back to life, right, exactly.
Those are the big ones that really...
Yeah, those are most of the big ones, yeah.
Jason Todd, for anybody who doesn't know, he was the second Robin. They put it up for a vote where they wanted Robin to get beaten to death by the Joker. Fans overwhelmingly said yes, beat the shit out of that guy to death, which happened.
And he died.
And then after Superboy threw a tantrum and Mike Tyson punched out the walls of the universe, then...
George Foreman's KO boxing.
Jason Todd came up and he's like, oh, I'm back to life. He became a bad guy. Became the Red Hood.
Which is an ironic twist. It's an ironic name. It's like Kira's going on outside of
Yeah, was that like it was like a motor cow.
Kill Bill is happening right in front of my apartment. That's the thing that cracks the audience's knowledge of what's happening, was that we find out that Power Girl is actually Supergirl. She finally realizes who she is, that she's actually Kara Zor-El from Earth 2, and she's still alive. There's no reason why she should be alive because her universe doesn't even exist, and she gets full knowledge of that. And so that's where you get that.
So that means she's a Kryptonian and not a Daxamite?
That is correct. She is actually a Kryptonian, and she didn't know that. That's the first time that we've acknowledged that Earth 2 existed since Crisis on Infinite Earth was a brilliant piece of work, a brilliant piece of retconning, where they took a mess of a continuity and they streamlined it, made it work, and worked out almost every loose thread they could possibly find and created a cohesive universe out of it. You know, of course, there were going to be hiccups, there were going to be little things that they missed here and there, but I mean, for the most part, they got like 99% of it right.
Yeah, especially when you needed to do it the most, because you had all these different versions of these different characters from different time periods, their backstories, what they did, who they were, how they operated. None of it really was coherent or worked. So for what Crisis did, it was quite amazing.
0 Hour was an issue. It just papered over stuff that was a problem and then created new problems. Mm-hmm. And then you get to Infinite Crisis, where they're like, okay, there are legitimately just tiny cracks in the story, just tiny problems, just tiny little problems. So let's explain those, and then we're going to be back to normal. While it did do that, Infinite Crisis worked. It made a lot of sense. But the problem was that it reintroduced the multiverse. That was their mistake, because the multiverse is what screwed them to begin with. Going back and making that their identity completely muddled things for everybody. And I'm not a puritanical type person when it comes to that kind of writing, but think about like Apple versus Android, right? Like, I actually prefer Android. I like to customize things and everything. I think that's good. I think there's innovation there, and I understand the mentality, sure. But at the end of the day, if you're not entrenched in how it works, Apple's better for you because everything works the same way. There's one idea. That's all you need to worry about. You have one ecosystem. Everything outside of that ecosystem is Marvel Comics. DC didn't get good until everything became coherent and everything got on the same page. It's very much like Star Trek in that sense, too. It didn't get good until there was a coherent narrative universe. Then it was pleasant. This feeds into all of my tendencies to want details and continuity to work. It's kind of the opposite of Star Wars. Because Star Wars used to be so scattershot and all over the place.
Yeah, which, like Android, led to innovations, led to a lot of new possibilities.
And a lot of fans who wouldn't normally have been sci-fi or fantasy fans coming into the genre, which is good. There's a place for that, and it's important that we have both. And then, of course, you got your Linux users, which, of course, that's
Image Comics? Yeah.
Dark Horse? I don't know. Eclipse. It's Eclipse Comics. DC had a good thing going. They streamlined the universe, and it was a Cadillac for 20 years of continuity. Every now and then, they'd have to tweak things to fix some continuity issues, but they always did because they had a baseline. They had a spine that they didn't have to go away from. Infinite Crisis did solve some of those problems, did explain what happened, but then, in my opinion, screwed the pooch. I like canon. I want to know what canon is.
Yes.
I want to know what canon is. You do too. Mm-hmm. With anything that you're reading, is Mara Jade in canon? Is
Superboy in canon?
We need to know these things, because how do we talk about the universe, the impact and the importance of the pillars of the universe if we don't know what's real and what's not? I think one of the only things that's ever relied on canon but also gotten away with that is probably Battlestar Galactica, when they do Blood and Chrome and it's the old Cylons.
Yeah, you have so much you're trying to deal with right now with just DC, and you keep going off on these tangents of like, hey, this world's also crazy, and this world's crazy.
So I'm just trying to give people examples who don't know DC or Marvel.
Here, Battlestar, that should make it easier for you.
You and I... Yes, let's use Star Trek and Star Wars. That'll fix it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know those much better. Thanks.
Oh, yeah, like those are way better examples of non-confusing timelines.
Yeah. We got to get to the Oasis. We just have to go through all this desert.
We're the movie Ishtar, apparently.
Oh, yeah. Could we use shampoo instead?
Wow. All right. Tip of the hat.
All that hair's going to fall out.
That's pretty good.
So Infinite Crisis kind of opened the back door to the multiverse. Mm-hmm. And as opposed to what Marvel tends to do, where they will pluck things from the multiverse, but it doesn't really affect their ongoing canon. Their continuity stays pretty much the same. They don't have as many weird versions of, well, they do, but
they have more weird versions.
It does, but it doesn't hang things up the same way that it does DC.
Yeah.
Trying to explain Cyclops or Jean Grey.
Okay. Cable
is a perfect example. We just pull them in. You just roll with it. Does any of this really make sense? Are we going to rewrite it 17 different times? Yeah, so whatever. Just keep going. But Superboy, what are we going to do, Superboy? It's just a completely different way of looking at things.
I'm sorry, but Marvel runs into the same problem where you need to know why Miles Morales exists in the same universe now that Peter Parker exists. These are real issues. You need to know why things happened in Secret Wars that don't count in the universe. You need to know why anything ever in the X-Men happens.
Hey, I'm not going to say it's not complicated, because it most certainly is.
I need to know who the frack Nathan Summers is, as opposed to Nathan Gray, as opposed to Nathan Dayspring, Ascani's son.
There is, but it doesn't tend to be as much of a hang-up as it is with DC continuity.
But it makes it just as confusing.
It is. I mean, that's the whole reason you had something like the Ultimate Universe, which is why one of the next things that DC does is something we're going to talk about with the New 52.
Mm-hmm. We have to do Flashpoint before that. But
we do. We could even touch on Final Crisis as well.
We will. Also, let me just say this. Days of Future Past, Cable's future, and Bishop's future are all different universes.
Yes. Yeah.
What the
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like Kingdom Come and Dark Knight Returns and Legion. Those are all three different futures of DC,
Well,
but they're plucked from.
One happens in the 30th century, one happens in the 80s, and the other one happens in, 2005 or whatever.
There's not really that big a difference, other than that, Marvel takes those characters and they say, these are from future possibilities, and they come to this, main timeline, and they just stay there.
I'm not saying you're wrong.
You're just an asshole. That's all.
I like the fact that we're having these conversations, though. It's going to be an 8-part series, apparently. This is going to be the new Highlander series.
Well, there's a lot to cover.
Well, it is the multiverse.
Remember, no matter where you go, there you are.